let's have a discussion about influence and partnership and how they're coordinated together thanks to the common thread of building long-lasting relationships. If you're a parent of a child of any age, one of the first relationships they form outside of their immediate family is the one with their teachers. They're often a critical lifeline of emotional and psychological support. Oftentimes, they even go above and beyond their job description to make sure that your child's educational experience is maximized to its fullest potential. And nationally, across America, teachers are realizing the commitment they're making, and they're hoping that their school districts are listening. According to my friends over at the National Education Association, many educators say that their school districts simply aren't supplying all the necessary material resources that their students need to be successful, engaged, comfortable, and ready to learn. A survey conducted by the U.S. Department of Education revealed that 94% of all teachers across America reach into their own pockets to support the needs of their students in the classroom, to cover the needs for basic necessities. For my friend Mills Rodgers, he spent 15 years in education as a teacher, meeting the needs of students each and every day. Now, as a speaker and consultant, he travels all over the country with one mission in mind: helping educators and administrators meet the needs of their students at large. Rodgers has a background in mental health and human resources, which equates to his passion for empowering educators and leaders to create equitable and inclusive learning and working environments. And Rodgers joined me this week to have an in-depth conversation about creating a forward-thinking vision for the future of education, how to improve its current state, and he even provided a message to educators and teachers alike surrounding the importance of their work and providing them with the encouragement necessary to continue with their educational and personal noble cause. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Mills, if you're ready, I'll take a moment, my friend, to welcome you to the program. And I'm super excited to talk to you this morning about your experience in education, my friend. Great to see you. And thank you for a few minutes this morning.
Well, I appreciate you having me. I'm excited to share my passion with your audience.
Absolutely, my friend. And I know that you're dedicated to helping educators meet the needs of children and their needs in the classroom, my friend. So I'm wondering if we can start our conversation by you telling me about your passion and purpose, my friend, and why it's so important to you.
Well, first off, I truly believe that education is valuable. It's the one reliable way in this country for the have-nots to join those that have. Yes, people can start businesses, they can strike it big, doing athletics or entertainment. But overall, for people to maybe leave from being at one income level or class, or being impoverished to rising above those circumstances. I feel like education is that one reliable and accessible way that people can do that in this country. And so, I spent a lot of time as a teacher. I taught 15 years in public schools. Also, my mom was a teacher, and I saw it in my own family where my mom came from a very impoverished background. However, education allowed her to rise above those circumstances. And her example was encouraging for the rest of my family to go to college and to again rise above the circumstances to get out of poverty.
Yeah, so let's talk about accessible and inclusive education, Mills, because I spend a lot of time talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion because I was born with a cerebral palsy, so my educational experience was different than most. So tell me, how do you think we can promote the need for better inclusive education for students with disabilities and other students who may need specialized education because of the way they were born or their learning difficulties as well. So, how do you describe inclusive education in your mind?
Inclusive education. Well, as I just mentioned, I spent 15 years in education, and I was actually an inclusion teacher for about half of that. So I would say probably 8 years or so, approximately. And so I'm real big on it. I saw it, to be honest, when I first came into education, I wasn't totally up to speed as far as like how inclusion was supposed to work. But then once I got that real world experience, I'm like, oh wow, this is great. And so inclusive education, here's the thing, you kind of have to know the history of educating those that have disabilities or special needs or just have needs in general outside of what your average student may have. And so understanding the history of that, then you start to begin like, hey, inclusive education really does work. It is helpful because what I saw was when you had students in a separate environment, those students that maybe have learning disabilities, physical disabilities, whatever else, then they didn't get quite the same level of education that the students that were considered general education students were getting. And so when you started to have more inclusive classrooms, you started to see where those students that in the past they were marginalized or um, people didn't feel like they had the ability to do well, you started to see them do well. They were killing it in the classroom. And that is why inclusive classrooms, inclusion in education is so important because we want to make sure that we are maximizing the potential and allowing all students to meet their abilities, to meet their potential.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Mills, let's talk about being a champion of education and really being an ally in education and developing people. How do you think those two things are interconnected
Being a champion and ally,
in
yeah,
education? How do you
yeah.
think those two things are interconnected? Yeah.
Well, I feel like all educators should be a champion and ally. A champion is basically someone who fights and advocates. And so, yes, if you're in education, you should be that type of person. If you're not, then you probably need to be moving in that direction or find another occupation. And the reason being is that a lot of our students, and if you look at the definition of a champion and then you take it to allyship, allyship has to do with marginalized communities. And so we often think of marginalized communities Race. Well, there's many categories outside of race in which people are marginalized. And when I say people, of course, that equates to students. So we have students that have challenges with physically. We have students with mental health. We have students with wealth, issues. They're impoverished. We have students that are LGBTQ plus. And so all of those are considered marginalized. And us as educators, we have a certain level of privilege. And again, that relates to allyship that we need to be using in order to uplift those populations. And so that's where I'm really big on being a champion and ally, that we use our privilege being in the building. Now, yes, maybe when we step outside the building, we don't have that same level of privilege. But when you're an educator in that building, you do have a level of privilege that other people don't have. And so we should be using that to uplift definitely our students that fit into those marginalized categories. And that's why I say we're champions and allies.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mills, I want to talk to you about the growth mindset in education and really having that connection and relationship between the educator, the parent, and the student. So, how do you think we can build robust relationships that build and strengthen the bond between all stakeholders in education? What are your thoughts there?
Great question. Well, I think the thing is we have to make it a partnership. Oftentimes, when schools talk to parents, especially on a more of a one-to-one basis, it comes off as the school is the authority, the parents are, they're the subordinates. And so I think we have to make it more of a partnership. We got to be more equals. And so I think, of course, it's going to start with teachers and their communications with parents. And so the communication has to be where, again, it's seen as a partnership, asking the parents, like if there is an issue with their student, asking the parents, like, hey, what do you do? Or what do you think is going on with so and so, their child, whenever they do this at school? And getting that input, having more of a dialogue as opposed to a monologue, I think is one of the key things in developing partnerships with all stakeholders in education. Being accessible. Educators shouldn't be hard to get in touch with. We have all kinds of means nowadays. You have email, you have social media. And so I think the education entities being very visible, on social media, also offering access through maybe apps or whatever else to stay in communication with parents. And then the actual communication itself being more of a partnership, collaborative effort as opposed to the authority talking down to parents. I think those are all things that would help.
Yeah, and Mills, I want to dive into your personal background, my friend, because I know that you've been a lifelong educator, a veteran, and you describe yourself as someone who really wants to meet the needs of students and parents and teachers where they are, my friend. So I'm wondering, with your experience, my friend, in education, what's the one lesson that you've learned in education that seems to be sort of standing the test of time, my friend? What are your thoughts there?
Standing the test of time, the one lesson is that I guess for me is that, like I mentioned in the beginning, education is the one way for the have-nots to join those that have. And I think that stands true over time, whether it was 30 years ago, whether it's now. And I know with social media and everything, a lot of stuff we see out there, education kind of gets a lot of people are talking down on education. Some of them doing it for self-serving purposes. But, the thing is, education is, again, that one way. And so I feel like it is very valuable. It offers you a lot of options as you move forward. And that's one of the things I used to always tell my students, because students would always be like, well, sir, I'm never going to use this in real life. And I'd be honest with them. I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. Unless you're going to go to school and maybe do something highly technical, like let's say we were talking about math. And so, yeah, let's say you're going to go to school and do something highly technical, like being an engineer or something like that. Then, yeah, you're probably not going to be doing a geometry problem as, you're walking down the street or something like that. But I would then preface it by saying, well, hey, do you want a high school diploma? Yeah, I need a high school diploma. And so you need to at least, with that being said, you need to at least learn this material so that you can accomplish that goal of getting your high school diploma, because your high school diploma will lead you to other options that you would have if you didn't, because if you didn't have it, then you wouldn't have those options. And so, that's kind of, where I'm coming from with education. And, I do want it to be accessible to everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, and part of that mission, my friend, you've written a book series called Success is a Process, my friend, and not an event. So tell me about the series, because I know it provides insights and tips on education, character, and personal development, my friend. So tell me about the series, my friend.
Sure. Yes. I'm one that never ever thought I would write a book, but once I got into this speaking thing, I decided like, hey, it probably would help for me to put some thoughts on paper and publish them. And so, yes, success is a process, not an event. As we've all heard that, there's no overnight success. Everything takes time. Everything takes consistency. It takes discipline, it takes dedication. And so that's basically what I'm talking about in my books. And the 4 books that I have is basically like a just different editions. As I moved along, got more experience, have new thoughts, published a new edition. And so in it, I talk about self-empowerment. I like to say that you're the person responsible for your shape, meaning you're responsible for your success, happiness, attitude, progress, and effort. I also like to say that you're a beast. You're brilliant, exceptional, amazing, strong, and talented. And so, with a couple of those acronyms right there, I go into detail about, again, having self-belief and how we oftentimes are our biggest obstacles, and we have to get out of our own way. And kind of in line with that, we suffer from imposter syndrome and thinking that we aren't good enough, or that success or talent is for somebody else. And that's why I say you are a beast. You're brilliant, exceptional, amazing, strong, and talented. And so that's what those books cover. I do have one geared more toward educators, where I use more examples from the classroom and the type of mindset that I believe educators need to have to stay afloat in the field and to have the biggest impact.
Yeah, and you talk about the mindset of the educator, Mills. I want to transition to sort of the mental health of teachers. A recent poll, my friend, from the Colorado Public Radio shows that most Americans believe that teachers or public school teachers are undervalued and underpaid by almost twice or two-thirds, depending. Showing from their poll, my friend. So tell me about how you think teachers need to be better valued, appreciated, and supported, my friend, and your overall thoughts on the poll as well.
Well, first off, we need teachers, obviously. This country provides for a free and appropriate education. And so, we do need quality teachers in the classroom. And, the thing is, everybody in this country experiences going to school at some point. And so with that being said, people are very opinionated as to education.
Mhm.
And I'm glad that people feel like um, teachers deserve raises, that 2/3, 66% roughly approve of that. And, they do see that teachers are undervalued and underpaid. And um, I would tell you this, having been a teacher, having been inside the building, most teachers do what they do because they really want to see kids do well. Most teachers do the right thing, and it's a tough job to try to manage 25 kids in a classroom at a time. And when you look at it, not too many occupations do that, and so teachers have a huge impact. I always think about the amount of students I came across in my 15 years. That was approximately 1,500 students, 100 a year that were in my classes. And to think about that, it's like, wow, how many other occupations out there can say that they impact approximately 100 people each year? And I mean, not just where they come in the office, come in your office for 30 minutes and leave. No, where you're seeing them consistently, where you're interacting with them, where you maybe even meet their family. Not too many occupations to do that. And so that's what teachers do. And so, yeah, I think, they are undervalued. Now, it would take, of course, those same people going to their politicians and saying, hey, this is something we would like to see, or going to their school boards, because unfortunately, education is paid through property taxes most of the time. And so people don't want to go up on their taxes. They say they want to see teachers be more compensated, but then if they got to go up on their taxes, maybe a penny or so, a lot of times they don't even want to do that. So that's kind of the catch-22 with that.
Yeah, and when we talk about the mental health of teachers, obviously, I don't need to tell you as an educational veteran that teachers often go into their own pockets to help meet the needs of their students from a financial perspective, and also they go above and beyond their job description. Just so tell me about how you think we can give teachers more resources to meet students where they are while also balancing their own mental health. What are your thoughts there?
Hmm. Well, I guess, when you're dealing with this type of work, whether it's education, social work, you have to be very careful with your mental health. You have to practice self-care because, you can become very engulfed in uh, just wanting to see your students doing better. And, you strain over them, that they're coming from different environments. And so, I know a lot of school districts have employee assistance programs where, you can go speak to a counselor, get that support. I would definitely encourage that. When I was a teacher, I sought employee assistance a number of times, just to support me. Because the thing is, yes, you're doing stuff at school, but then you have life outside of school. And so, it's all demanding. And so whatever support that you can get for your mental health to help you juggle those responsibilities is very, very important. As far as teachers having to go into their pockets for resources and that sort of thing, I know a lot of teachers now I'm starting to see where they're asking for, help from people in general through donations and that sort of thing for resources for the classroom. Because and that oftentimes happens because students sometimes are not coming to class with supplies, and that can be a hindrance as far as getting the lessons done, making progress in class. So many times teachers, we want to just come with everything the students need so that we can get the ball rolling. And we're not waiting, or students aren't falling behind because of a lack of resources. And so that's why that tends to happen. And, anything that, you can do to help teachers in that regards trust me, is greatly appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. And Will, I want to also talk about the role of parent engagement in their child's academic success, because parents really have to be involved in order for their child to be academically successful. Would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. In fact, I would say that the parents should take the initiative by reaching out to teachers at the very beginning of the year, just introducing themselves through email, of course. Doesn't have to be in person. If it is in person, that's even better. But just, reaching out to them saying, hey, I'm so and so's parent, and if you have any issues, let me know. And if there is something that is important about your child that you feel the teacher needs to know, let them know in that email. And I think that's one way, again, of starting to build that partnership with the school and with the teachers. And here's the reality: the squeaky wheel gets the oil. And so if you're that parent, and I'm not saying you got to be the parent to complain, but if you're the parent that's making yourself known to teachers, and you're communicating with them about any issues or concerns that you may have, then that teacher is going to definitely probably give your child a little bit more attention, and your child will probably end up being a little bit more successful. And so, I'm just kind of giving that nugget right there. Um, Another thing I would suggest is educating your child outside of the school, taking your child on um, just even in your local community, just things that are historical, or, getting them books. Education should be occurring outside of the classroom, because I feel like when that happens, then kids, when they go to the classroom, they are better students, and they're more open to learning. And so as a parent, I feel, yes, you should be taking your child to maybe museums if possible, uh landmarks, just things just in nature that they can observe. I mean, even this eclipse the other day, well, it happened during the school day, but that's a great thing just to talk about or do with your kids if you had that opportunity. Because again, once kids see that learning is important outside of school, then they take more of um, a liking to it in school.
Yeah, absolutely. And uh, Mills, if I asked you to describe the current state of today's educational system, how would you describe it, my friend?
Ooh, man, I'm blessed to, go all over the country, and, see it in different forms in different places. And I would say that it's definitely in transition, with the pandemic and everything. Uh, a lot of entities are still experiencing shortages. And so they're trying to come up with ways to address those issues and the issues that kids have had coming out of the pandemic, as far as socialization, and also just infusing technology. And so there's a lot of things going on. I feel like it still works, but then there are things that need to be improved about it. And I think the sad and toughest thing is that something I mentioned earlier, where people often are highly critical of the education system. However, no one has great solutions. Everybody kind of sees it from one side. So I don't know. That's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, and just one follow up. I'm curious to ask you about how we can get sort of the politics out of education and really focus on the educational side of improving education while also sort of removing the political angle. What are your thoughts there? I'm fascinated.
Oh, that's a good
Yeah,
one. The political angle. Well, it's so weird because most I've seen people from all sides of the political spectrum that are in education, and they pretty much will agree that, even if it's somebody from their side of the aisle, they'll be like, man, that's a bad move, or, I don't agree with that. And so, how do we take the politics out of it? That's a tough one because, unfortunately, education is funded by taxes. And so taxes have to be voted on and everything. And so that's what makes it challenging. Like, how do we take the politics out of education? I think we have, if there's anything, I think we'd have to be much more active at the school district levels, showing up to those school board meetings and um, even going to the state legislatures, getting in uh, our representatives' ears. I think those are some of the things, but I think of course, it has to start off, you know, at the ground, at the grassroots, the ground. And so, yes, school districts or even showing up on campuses, being part of the PTA, that sort of thing. I think those are things that will help education be less political. There's always going to be an element of politics in it because of the fact that, again, it's funded through taxes.
absolutely. And, but Fred, I'm curious to also ask you, what do you think it will continue to mean to have a forward-thinking vision in education? What are your thoughts there?
Well, I think to be forward thinking, you have to understand where you're coming from. And so I feel just giving context to what education maybe used to look like. And then, of course, as an educator, you think about what it looked like when you were coming up, and then looking at the current state of your students and what are their needs at this time. And, I'm really big on needs. Needs stands and I created an acronym for needs. It stands for students need nurturing, engagement, equity, dependability, and standards. And so, with that being said, when we talk about being forward thinking, we have to think about, hey, how can we meet those particular needs of students, of all students, making sure that we're creating an inclusive environment, and so it means, basically opening our minds up to the use of technology and thinking outside the box.
Yeah, and to that point, I'm curious to ask you about what are the being equitable in education will mean going forward, and what do you think it means to meet the moment in education today? What do you think it means to meet the moment in education?
Well, equitable basically is meeting individual needs of learners. And so you combine it with equality. Equality is where everybody gets the same. Well, we all know that it sounds good and it's kind of good in theory, but then not everybody needs the same thing. It's just like if I had a bunch of shirts, if I had a bunch of these shirts, and I'm like, well, okay, I'm gonna give out, everybody's gonna get a shirt, but it's gonna be a large. Well, that's equality right there, because guess what? Some people will need a small, some people might need a double X. Whereas equity is giving that shirt the size shirt that everyone needs. And so that's kind of how it should look in education. Now, when you're dealing with a classroom of 20 to 30 students, being equitable is, it's a little bit of a challenge, so you kind of have to adjust that definition. And you know you're just going to have to look at each learner individually and see which one maybe has higher needs and spend more time with those learners. And so, to me, that's what equitability looks like in education.
Yeah, and Mills, I know you do a lot of speaking to uh, school administrators and teachers around the country, and I'm curious to ask you, what have they been telling you about their greatest concerns and successes in education? What are professionals on the ground telling you about education today, my friend? I'm curious.
Well, it's one of the biggest issues tends to be staff shortages. And, coming out of the pandemic, it seems like it's gotten better this past year or so. However, people are like, all of this training and everything is great, but we don't have enough staffing to go around to make this the most ideal. And so that seems to be a big issue. Also, they're saying that kids coming out of the pandemic, they're just not, they just don't have the social skills. A lot of them are just very closed off. You might see a big group of them together on campus and nobody's talking to each other. Everybody's on their phone. And so, those are some of the things that I'm hearing, like, the socialization of the students. Students are just very isolated now, even though, yeah, they're connected online and everything, but, they're just very, very lonely. Um, family dynamics aren't the best. And so those are some of the things that I'm hearing from professionals concerning, education nowadays.
Yeah, and if any teacher or administrator who works, for example, in a Title I school and doesn't really have the same resources as their counterparts in a more affluent school, my friend, I'm curious, what do you think your message would be about the importance of resilience and closing the equitable gap in education? What would be your message to those educators at large?
Okay, great question. Yeah, I mostly worked at Title One schools when I was an educator. So, for me, I would just, the hope. I like to encourage teachers and inspire teachers by telling them, look, you're providing these families with a lot of hope. Um, a child is a parent's most precious commodity. Parents live for their children, they love their children, they have hope for them for the future. And so, as an educator, you are a hope agent. And with that being said, it's so important that we give our all. And the fact that I know that most educators want to see kids do well, I think that's just a great combination right there for us to have a huge impact on the kids and families that we serve.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mills, I know you do a lot of work with personal and professional character and development, my friend. So I'm curious to ask you if you think there's a difference between personal and professional character. Do you think there's a difference there, or do you think they're interconnected?
I think they're interconnected, but we handle things differently, within our homes probably, or with our families compared to what we would do in a professional setting. But at the same time, I would hope that, yeah, there is an interconnection between the two. I would hope that we're not totally different in those two settings, because then that lacks authenticity. And, I think authenticity is so important as far as, um, just being able to leave a good legacy and to be a leader, whether it be in a personal or professional setting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got two questions left for you, and the first has to do with something I want to circle back to what you said earlier about kids being connected to their phones and really not authentically interacting with their peers or within their educational journey sometimes because they're connected to their phones all the time. So tell me, how do you think we can encourage kids to get disconnected from technology when appropriate and really have that authentic educational experience?
Ooh, good question. I'm one where I don't feel like technology is bad. It does serve its purpose. It is helpful. I know it's been extremely helpful to me, and so just want to make that clear that I do feel like technology is important. We need to embrace it. At the same time, like anything, too much of it is probably not the best thing. And so, um, I think as far as kids, you got to offer them things to where they probably don't need technology. They don't need something to entertain them. And so giving them activities to do, putting them in extracurriculars like band or athletics or art or those sorts of things where they can kind of tap into their creative side. And because I truly believe that if you look at it, most of the time those kids that unfortunately have discipline problems, they're the least engaged kids at school. They're generally not in any extracurriculars. They're generally not in sports. They're generally not in band or music or just other things that the school is offering. And so that's why I say, I think it's just so important that, we offer kids, as parents, we need to make sure our kids are doing things, they're part of something so that, it's kind of like the saying goes, an idle mind is the devil's playground. And so, yes, keep them busy.
Absolutely. And if you keep them busy, that means they sleep at night, right?
Yeah.
There's a benefit to it, right?
Yes, yes, sir.
Absolutely. And my friend, my final question for you is about legacy and how you want your own personal and professional legacy to be defined.
My own personal and professional legacy. Man, that's a great question. I want to be recognized as, well, personally, I always think about my kids. And so for them, because they've seen my journey, they've seen me going from being a teacher to now being a speaker and having traveled all over the country and everything. I've brought my youngest daughter to a couple of speaking engagements and, so that she can see that, hey, this is what dad does. And he's out there talking to people and making an impact. And so for me, that's huge, because I do feel like leaders, and parents, we are leaders. We have to lead by example. And so when your kids see you going all in on your dreams and your goals, then it helps them. It makes it more of a reality for them. They're like, hey, if my parent can do that, and I've seen all the nuts and bolts of it, then I can do it too. And so for me, that's part of a personal legacy right there. It's like, again, them seeing that transition, seeing that things have improved, over time because dad took action to chase his dream and, have an impact. As far as professional legacy, just with the idea that, hey, I'm helping kids. I feel like I said earlier, uh, kids are parents' most precious commodities, and they are the future. The kids are going to grow up. They're cute at one point, but then they grow up into adults, and they're going to be leading society. And the fact that I'm contributing to hopefully a better education for them is that's a huge legacy. And the fact that I'm able to share my word with thousands, a growing number of people is just, it's almost like, wow.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, my friend, if people want to get connected with the good work that you do, what's the best and most efficient way they can do that?
Oh man, I'm pretty easy to find. So you can do it through my website, www.successisaprocess.net. You can find me on social media, Rodgers, Rodgers, Speaks, Speaks on Instagram and TikTok. Also, you can just put in my name, Mills Rodgers. You'll find me on LinkedIn. You'll find me on Facebook. Again, not too hard to find.
Well, absolutely, my friend. I want to thank you for your commitment to education and molding the minds of our future generation of students and educators alike, my friend. You're really moving the needle of progress forward. And I want to thank you for engaging in conversation with me this morning and for being here. It's most appreciated.
Thank you for having me.